Hi everyone and welcome back to a new video. Today I'm gonna talk about my shading tool and how you can use it for creating this kind of material, this kind of shading. So today I'm gonna show you how to use the layer material, because with the layer material you will know how to use also the opaque material because it's combining both. So let's start with the beginning. Let's start with an asset. If I'm going to content, I think I've got, no, I don't have a generated asset. Yeah, it's here, generated. Here, perfect. We got our wonderful ground. Let's go with our material. So to get your material, you can go into material that is here, and in material, you're gonna get the layer folder. And in the layer folder, you got the material main here. Can delete this one because I don't need it. Okay. Let's right click and create a material instance. If I'm going inside, I'm going to get the background and 3 layers. I'm just going to need 2 layers and 1 background. I've downloaded in the Quixel Megascan surface 3 texture that we're going to use, 3 shading that we're going to use, the forest rocky and nautic forest ground roots, and the mossy ground here. We're going to use those 3 material for our layer material. So for that, let's go back into, not the world grid, sorry. Let's go back into our main layer, main instance. Let's go dragging it here. And here we go. So in the background, we're gonna add our first material. So if you're going there, you got the material LE main. That's what we're gonna use. Per default, you got this. Let's go there. And let's do something like this to get a good result of what we want. So inside of this layer assets, you got the texture here. It's where you're going to put your texture. If I'm going into Megascan and I'm checking this forest rocky, I got my texture here. All my texture are already in virtual texture here. We are working with virtual texture because we're working with UDIM here. So if you got some texture that you did and that got UDIM, you can directly drag and drop them and it's gonna work. So if you want to convert your texture that are not in virtual tracing, you can just right click on it, convert virtual tracing to regular. It's gonna show the invert. If I'm going this, and now I'm going back, I got convert to virtual texture here. And it's gonna convert automatically. You can just select all of them and do the same here. Or you can do if I'm going into asset action, can make both of them if I want. Edit selection property matrix, that's it. And now you can just take, for example, all your shade, all your texture and everything, and just change anything you want here. And just check virtual texture here. So if you got tons and tons of texture, you can directly put virtual texture on each of them with the virtual matrix here. Really useful. So let's go back to our forest rocky pine here. Let's drag and drop the albedo, that's going to be here, the ORD because it's optimized for that, you can directly drag and drop that here, and the normal. Then, because it's a tile texture, let's check tile texture here. It's going to show me the UV here. For the UV, it's too big, way too big. If I'm taking a cube that is 1 meter, you can see it's way too big for shading, for texture. So let's drop down this to 0.25, for example. Got something more realistic. But you got back the tile effect, and we don't that. We want to rid off of that tile effect. For doing that, you can go to UV variation and just check it. It's way better already, but you can do better. You can go into random rotation and scale UV and check that too. And you got a really real variation of scale, rotation, and position. And you can change that level here if you want. So right now, we don't have that tiling effect. That's perfect. Let's go into our albedo because it's too much saturate. So for that, albedo saturation, and you can turn down that saturation, something like this, 0.25. You can also change the brightness to something a little bit darker. And a little bit more contrast. Perfect. Let's go back to 0.25. For a little bit more variation, you can check albedo variation. It's just a noise and it's gonna change the brightness, the contrast, whatever you want, also the tints. I'm just gonna turn off a little bit the contrast to get something more subtle, like this, with a little bit more of brightness. That's nice. It's not really visible, but it's doing the trick. And obviously, by default, the variation is here, because we don't want any way to look at the tile effect, even for the albedo variation. Now that we got this, let's go into our dirt. You can enable dirt, and here it's gonna ask for a texture. I already got, if I'm going to default, a texture for that. Let's check, for example, the dust wipes. Let's turn up the brightness, and you're gonna see that we got some variation here. We can change the color of the dirt to get something less saturated. Something like this. It's working right. Let's turn down the brightness. Let's do something like this, and we got a good dirt, a good variation. For the displacement map, if you activate the displacement map like this, it's not going to work. Why? Because in detail, you need to go into enable tessellation. And right now you're going to get the variation. If we are in Nanite, I don't remember if I did that for the object. Yeah, we are in Nanite. That's perfect. Let's go back into our material. So now if I'm going to my detail here, I can put 16 if I'm crazy. Even 42, let's go. Let's be crazy. You get a real good displacement map. Obviously, the displacement map, you can change it if you're going into layer parameter with the disc brightness. If I don't want that, I can remove it. You can also change the contrast of it. Really useful. Now that I got this, I don't care about the emissive, the mask, or the metalness, because we don't use it. Same thing for the roughness. I think we are done with the first material. Let's add a second layer. So if I'm going to layer 1, I can add again a material. If I'm going here, MLE main. Let's take now our second texture, because we got the same parameters. We can go here into albedo, org, and normal, and enable it. And drag and drop our materials. And we're gonna do the same for this one. So tile texture UV. Let's use the same size for our UV. UV variation, random rotation, and UV variation. And for this one, let's change a little bit this to get something like that, and even change the rotation. That's going to do the trick. We're going to change also the saturation because it is too much, and maybe the brightness too. Perfect. For the albedo variation, we're going to add some. Let's change the variation of that. Let's change the offset of that variation, the tile 2 to something like 0.5. And now let's turn down the contrast to something like this to get something subtle. That's nice. Now let's go into our dirt and let's enable dirt, and let's use the same texture that was in default mesh texture. Let's add the brightness. Let's do something like this, and let's change the color of that to get something less saturated. Something like this. That's doing the trick. And let's activate the displacement map. And it's going to activate per default the displacement map. That's perfect. And now let's add a material blend asset. So if I'm going here, I got the MLBE main. You can also find that here into layer MLB, and you got the instance here MLBE main. Same thing for the main material. You got ML main and MLB MLA main for the instance. Now, in the tool blend asset, you can blend with a surface imperfection, texture, but you can also blend with a vertex color. So for that, let's go with the red first. I think per default, it got some red. So for that, if I'm going into the modeling mode, I'm already here in the modeling mode. If I'm going into the attributes, I can paint vertex color here if my computer wants. Perfect. If I'm going to the material mode, I can change it to unlit, to lit vertex color. And here I got everything I need. Let's erase all and fill black. So you get your first material, your background. Now, if I'm going to the paint color, let's paint some red. And here I can paint some red. Let's change the size of it with a fall off, and let's paint dumbly, things like that. Perfect. It's just for the demo, I don't care. For the erase, I'm just going to put in black. Now if I'm doing shift and left click, I can paint back some black. Perfect. And now if I'm going back into the original material, we got some blend. I'm going accept to get back my my displacement map. And here we go. And now if I'm uncheck the vertex red, you can see that it's doing the trick. It's creating my assets. If I want, I can go into layer assets, debug, and check debug. And I can look where the material is. So the material is here. Let's go. If I want, I can go also into my displacement map, this brightness, this contrast, and change that here if I want. Let's uncheck debug to change that. Let's turn down the displacement right, and you can see here what it is doing. It's changing only the displacement of my assets, of my my painted layer. Perfect. And now we can do the same for the layer 2. MLE main. Let's go into our texture. Let's search for the mossy ground. We need to activate them. Let's add the tile texture. Change the tiling. UV variation. Random random rotation and scale. You got something right directly. Then in Albedo, let's change the saturation, something like 0.25. I think that's good. Ooh, that's saturated. Let's change a little bit to contrast, something like this. Perfect. Let's add some variation on the albedo. That's nice. Let's go into our dirt. Let's add again the texture. This time I need to offset it just to get a different result. Let's go into dirt color and let's change that to something more greenish like this. Less saturated. And we got a good result. Now let's activate the displacement. Let's change this brightness to 4 or 3 because we want that to be on top of the other. We're on 0.5 and let's change this to something like this. Perfect. And now let's go into our material layer blend. For this one, I'm going to do something different for this layer. I'm going to go into vertex color green because I used the red. Let's check green because in parent vertex color, I can go here into action, fluid fill connected, and just paint everything in green. So everything is in green. That's why when I checked green, everything was here. What I can also do is add a texture. If I'm going to surface imperfection, activate surface imperfection, then you got nothing. Why? Because if I'm going to imperfection brightness, I can create some imperfection. I can use a texture to drive my mask of the layer. And I can get something really cool, a little bit random, but something really cool like this. That's perfect. Now I can accept it. And I can combine, for example, a vertex color, so I can paint my vertex and everything. And I can add on top of that vertex, a surface imperfection, a texture to drive that mask. That's really useful to get something more realistic, something that you can't paint. And here we go. We got a perfect ground with some displacement maps, some difference of shading, of texture, of displacement, of everything. Some that are paints, some that are not paints with only texture map. And that's working perfectly for what we want. That's the power of that layer shading material that I've created and that you can have if you're going into the link in description into my Gumroad. So I hope you liked it. I'm going to share an over tool and over tutorial on how to use them. I hope you will like it. See you soon.